July 20th, 2016. A quiet village in the Punjab province of Pakistan. A father dials the local police and reports something no parent should ever have to say. His daughter is dead. When officers arrive at the house, they find a young woman lying motionless at the bottom of a staircase. There's nothing anyone can do for her. Investigators notice bruising across her body, a trace of pink-tinted foam near her mouth. Her father has an explanation ready. She must have suffered a sudden medical episode, lost her footing, and fallen. No one else was home, he says. By that evening, the case is closed. No criminal investigation. The official record will state natural causes. She's buried within hours, the same day she died. But thousands of miles away, one person refuses to accept that story: her husband. And what he uncovers next will expose a secret her own family had been hiding for years. A secret that reaches back to a marriage she never wanted, a love she wasn't allowed to keep, and a family that some say would rather see her dead than see her happy. If you're new here, this channel breaks down real true crime documentaries, cases built on court records, police reports, and verified facts. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because we cover stories like this every week. This is the story of Samia Shahed, a British-born woman caught between two worlds, and a death her own family tried to bury as an accident. Let's stick to the facts. Before we go further, it helps to understand the label investigators would eventually attach to this case, what's often referred to as an honor crime. In various parts of the world, these are incidents where women are targeted by their own relatives, punished for actions the family believes brought shame or dishonor onto them. The reasons behind these cases differ from culture to culture, but they often circle back to accusations of infidelity or straying from family and religious expectations. What makes cases like this especially hard to stomach is that, in many instances, the people responsible face little to no legal consequence, sometimes even viewed within their own communities as having done what needed to be done. In countries where these cases have historically surfaced, law enforcement has often been criticized for not investigating thoroughly enough. Officials claim penalties have gotten stricter over the years, but there's limited public data confirming how consistently those laws actually get enforced. Samia Shahed's case, back in 2016, shook people around the world and later became the subject of a documentary. She'd been pressured into marrying her cousin, a man she couldn't stand, before eventually being sent back to her family's ancestral village. Later, she ended that marriage to be with the man she truly loved against her family's wishes. That decision would cost her everything. The case drew massive international attention, partly because Samia held British citizenship. But the crime itself happened in Pakistan, where authorities moved quickly to rule it an accident instead of digging deeper. Samia's parents, Chaudhry Muhammad Shahed and Mumtaz Shahed, immigrated to the United Kingdom in the mid-1980s from a small village called Pandori in the Jhelum district of Punjab. Like a lot of immigrant families, they left hoping to build something better than what they'd known. In November 1987, their oldest daughter, Samia, was born in Bradford, West Yorkshire. A few years later came their younger daughter, Mima. Samia's father started a car rental business that eventually grew into luxury vehicle and limousine rentals. As it took off, he helped bring both of his brothers and their families over from Pakistan too, and they built their own successful businesses. By the early 2000s, one brother ran a chain of seafood markets, and the other launched a flower and floral design company. The Shahed family had become a known name in Bradford, wealthy, respected, and well-connected within their community. Samia and Mima were both born and raised in the UK, but inside their home, the customs of their family's homeland stayed firmly intact. The sisters grew up straddling two very different worlds, the freedoms of British life on one side, and the strict expectations of their household on the other. Neither of them was allowed to drive, and nearly everything about their daily lives, where they went, who they talked to, was closely watched by their father. Samia, the oldest, was especially close with her dad and was widely seen as his favorite. He rarely told her no. Designer clothes, jewelry, tuition at one of the country's top universities. Nothing was off the table. She loved her appearance, wore high-end cosmetics, visited upscale salons, and spent serious money on beauty treatments, even while only working part-time at a local post office. In reality, her father covered almost everything. She'd sometimes rent a car without telling anyone and take it for a drive. She loved being behind the wheel, felt completely at ease on the road, and never understood why tradition said women in her family shouldn't drive at all. She had a strong will and valued her independence. But at the same time, she rarely wanted to disappoint her parents, and usually did what was expected of her. Back home, she had a wide circle of friends from school and college, people who described her as warm, kind, and full of life. But even surrounded by love and financial comfort, Samia was never fully free to make her own choices. Nearly every major decision in her life ran through her parents and older relatives. More than anything, she feared disappointing her father, the person she admired most. And because of that fear, she was never completely honest with her family about who she really was or what she actually wanted. In 2012, her parents decided it was time for their oldest daughter to settle down. They told her she'd be traveling to Pakistan, where the wedding would take place according to long-standing family tradition. The man they'd chosen for her cousin, a man we'll call Shakil, was someone she barely knew. It's worth noting that marriages between relatives and arranged marriages in general have long been practiced in some communities. They're not a religious requirement, but the tradition still runs deep in many families. Samia had always known that one day her parents would simply announce who she'd be marrying. She'd made peace with that possibility, but when she found out who her father had picked, she was genuinely stunned. She couldn't stand Shakil. Being around him made her deeply uncomfortable. And on top of that, he'd only recently gotten out of prison, tied to a fatal dispute over land. Ironically, Samia's own parents were also first cousins. Their marriage had been arranged the same way, and over time, they'd genuinely fallen in love. Her mother and father believed the same thing would happen for their daughter, but Samia couldn't bring herself to challenge her father's decision. She understood how much this marriage meant to him. Later, both her mother and her sister would insist that no one force Samia into anything, that given how independent and strong-willed she was, forcing her would have been impossible. According to them, she agreed on her own. By early February 2012, the decision was finalized during a family meeting. Over the following weeks, Samia's parents and her soon-to-be in-laws took her shopping almost daily. New outfits, fine jewelry, luxury cosmetics, anything she wanted, no expense spared. But looking back, it felt less like preparing a bride and more like something else entirely being arranged. Samia acted excited about the wedding on the outside. Inside, she felt like a hostage. She already knew this marriage would never bring her happiness, that it would become a sentence she never chose. The only people she told the truth to were her friends. At home, she smiled, talked wedding plans, and packed for Pakistan like everything was exactly what she wanted. On February 20th, 2012, Samia boarded a flight to Pakistan. While still sitting on the plane, she messaged one of her closest friends saying she was flying thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she felt like she had no other choice. On February 27th, Samia and Shakil's wedding took place in Pandori. Nearly 1,000 guests came. The celebration ran 4 days. As a wedding gift, her parents gave the couple a 2-story home right next to the family's own house in the same village. To everyone else, it looked like a beautiful gift. To Samia, it looked like a prison she'd be living in for the rest of her life. Married life brought her no happiness, just like she expected. She still couldn't stand her husband, and it didn't take long to realize she'd never grow to love him, never even feel comfortable in the same room as him. 4 months later, in the middle of June 2012, Samia flew back to Bradford to take care of some personal matters and help start Shakil's immigration paperwork, so he could eventually move to the UK. Her job was to file for a spousal visa. She wasn't in any rush. For the first time in months, she was tasting freedom again. Space away from a husband she never wanted. When she finally sat down to handle the paperwork, she discovered something she hadn't known. Their wedding, performed under Islamic tradition, counted as a religious marriage contract, but it had no legal standing under British law. For the marriage to be officially recognized in the UK, they'd need a separate civil ceremony and a government-issued certificate. After she got back from Pakistan, her friends noticed the change immediately. She seemed withdrawn, emotionally worn down. The bright, outgoing woman they had always known just wasn't there anymore. She didn't smile the way she used to, and it was obvious she was carrying real resentment toward her parents. Any mention of her husband or married life set her off. There was a reason for that. Shaquille was intensely jealous, and even from another country he kept tabs on her constantly, calling nonstop, demanding video calls at random, checking where she was and who she was with. It was less about staying connected and more about control. In early August that year, Samia broke down during a phone call with one of her closest friends. She admitted she was completely drained, emotionally exhausted, and had lost hope for anything better. She said she hated Shaquille with everything she had and never wanted to see him again, but she couldn't say any of that to her family. They were still out there proudly telling everyone about the wedding they had arranged for their oldest daughter. By early September, with the visa paperwork still unfinished, Samia had no choice but to head back to Pakistan, back to the husband she never wanted. She kept messaging friends, describing how miserable she was, how trapped she felt, with no way out. That continued for months. Then, almost without warning, the messages slowed down. Her mood started lifting, and during her next trip back to the UK, the reason became clear. Samia had met a man online. We'll call him Saeed. Like her, he was British-born with Pakistani heritage, raised in London, but he'd spent recent years working in the UAE. What started as simple conversations turned into something real fast. They arranged to meet in secret, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. It didn't take long for Samia to realize he was everything she'd hoped to find: kind, thoughtful, respectful. They clicked easily, shared the same interests, and being together just felt right. Both of them understood exactly how dangerous this relationship could become. But it didn't matter. Life only made sense when they were together. Samia was completely honest with Saeed about her situation. She told him she was ready to end her marriage and start over with him. But legally, she was stuck. Under British law, her religious marriage was never recognized in the first place, so a British court couldn't grant her a divorce from it. In spring 2014, Samia finally confronted Shaquille and asked for a divorce. He flatly refused, telling her she belonged to him for the rest of her life. On another visit back to the UK, Samia quietly reached out to a local Islamic Sharia council. She explained she'd been pressured into the marriage, grounds for having the religious union annulled. Around the same time, she converted to the branch of Islam Saeed practiced. A religious official contacted Shaquille to hear his side. He refused to discuss it and made clear he'd never agree to a divorce. After reviewing everything, the council ruled the marriage should be annulled, concluding Samia had entered it under significant family pressure. Her family had no idea any of this had happened, or that she was already preparing to marry the man she truly loved. In September 2014, she quietly married Saeed in a private ceremony. This time, it was fully legal, an official marriage certificate recognized under UK law. Only a handful of close friends even knew. For the first time in years, Samia was genuinely happy. She told friends she felt like she was living in a fairy tale, like she could hardly believe it was real. But what should have been the happiest chapter of her life quickly turned into the beginning of a nightmare. When Shaquille demanded she return to Pakistan, Samia told him she wasn't his wife anymore and showed him proof of her new marriage. That sent him into a rage. He immediately called her father, setting off a massive family conflict. Relatives started threatening her, demanding she come back and return to the marriage she'd already left. She refused. That decision would come at a devastating cost. A couple weeks later, Samia was attacked while out shopping with her sister. Her sister wasn't touched, only Samia. The attackers hit her with metal rods, leaving her with serious injuries, narrowly avoiding broken bones. She reported it to police, and an investigation opened, but the attackers were never identified, and the case quietly faded away. Around that time, Saeed had to return to Dubai for work, while Samia stayed behind in the UK, waiting on her visa. Those weeks were an ordeal. Constant threats, endless arguments with family, real fear for her safety. Her parents tried to challenge the legitimacy of her separation and even confronted the religious leader who'd married her and Saeed. Her mother was furious, accusing her of shaming the family and warning there'd be consequences. In spring 2015, Samia's visa finally came through, and she flew to Dubai to be with her husband. It felt less like a trip and more like an escape. She believed her family would do anything to stop her from leaving. For months, she kept her passport hidden with trusted friends who bought her plane ticket and walked her to the gate themselves, just to make sure she got on that flight safely. The following year became the happiest of Samia's life. She finally made her own decisions. She lived with a man who adored her. She could drive whenever she wanted, something neither her parents nor her first husband would have ever allowed. The photos she posted online said it all. She looked lighter, happier, more like herself than she'd been in years. Samia hoped she and Saeed would start a family soon. That dream would never come true. But the couple looked forward with real optimism, making plans, believing their best years were still ahead, completely unaware that the people closest to Samia had already decided her fate. Right after Samia left for Dubai, her parents went to the police and reported her missing. Later, they tried to have the case reclassified as an abduction, pointing the finger at Saeed. Behind the scenes, members of the Shahed family started discussing how to bring her back, no matter what it took. Threats hadn't worked, so they tried something else. If fear couldn't do it, maybe guilt could. In June 2016, Samia got heartbreaking news from her parents. Her aunt, Shakil's mother, had passed away. She was devastated, and she considered flying to Pakistan for the funeral, even though she understood how risky that trip could be. Many of her relatives had never accepted that she'd left a marriage she didn't want and legally married someone else. To them, it was betrayal, a source of shame. About a week after the funeral, her mother called again. This time, she said Samia's father's health had taken a serious turn. He might not have much time left. He'd been living with diabetes for years, and his condition had become unstable. Samia couldn't shake the fear that if he passed before she saw him again, she'd never forgive herself. Despite her own fears, and despite Saeed doing everything he could to talk her out of it, she agreed to go back to Pandori. Worried for her safety, she made her husband a promise. She'd stay in constant contact the whole time. On July 14, 2016, Samia landed in Pakistan. Before going anywhere near her family, she stopped to see a close friend first, leaving her passport and her return ticket to Dubai in her care for safekeeping. She told her friend she had a bad feeling about the trip and asked her to pray she'd make it back safely. The next several days passed without incident. Samia stayed in regular contact with both her husband and her friend, keeping them updated. She visited her aunt's grave with family, spent time with relatives, and had a flight booked back to Dubai for July 21st. But on July 20th, Samia suddenly stopped answering calls and messages. Later that day, her father called the local police station and reported that his daughter had died. When officers arrived at the house she'd once shared with her first husband, they found her at the bottom of a staircase. There was nothing anyone could do. Investigators noted several bruises on her body. Her father said they were from the fall. Officers also noticed a small amount of pink-tinted foam near her mouth. According to her father, Samia had likely suffered a sudden medical episode, lost her footing, and fallen. No one else was home, he said, so help hadn't come in time. When officers asked where her first husband was, her father said he'd stepped out to handle personal business. Police found no obvious signs of foul play and chose not to open a criminal case, leaving the final call to the medical examiner. An autopsy was performed that same day. The official report found no evidence of assault, and Samia's death was ruled the result of natural causes. She was buried within hours, the same day she died. Almost no one questioned that conclusion, except her husband. When Saeed was told his wife had died of a sudden heart-related event, he didn't believe it for a second. Some outlets even reported she'd taken her own life, struggling with the inability to start a family, a version that didn't even match what her own relatives were saying, which was that she'd lost consciousness on the stairs and suffered a fatal fall. Saeed got on the first flight to Pandori. The moment he landed, he went straight to the police and told them his wife had been killed by her own family. He laid it all out: the forced first marriage, the escape, the ongoing threats from relatives. That single conversation changed the direction of the entire case. Investigators began to suspect this wasn't an accident at all. It was something far more deliberate. But by then, Samia was already buried, and the official record said natural causes. Because Samia held British citizenship, Saeed pushed hard to get UK authorities and international media involved. At first, her father gave interviews trying to paint Saeed as a fraud, even accusing him of trying to extort the family. But That story fell apart the moment Saeed produced their legal marriage certificate, a copy of the medical examiner's report he'd fought hard to obtain, and photographs taken after her death. Those documents opened a new investigation. The report noted bruising on her neck and legs, along with evidence suggesting she hadn't been alone shortly before she died. That raised an obvious question. If her first husband had supposedly been away from the house that day, who had actually been with her? Saeed held a press conference and laid everything out. Messages, voice recordings, video clips of Samia saying over and over that she feared for her life. Public suspicion grew fast that the original investigation had been buried on purpose. Samia's father and her first husband were taken into custody. Investigators concluded they'd never intended to let her go back to Dubai at all. Instead, they'd kept her at the house that had once been her wedding gift, searching through her belongings for her passport and plane ticket, both of which, as we know, she'd already left with a trusted friend. According to investigators, what followed was a violent confrontation. When Samia tried to get away, the two men caught up with her at the staircase, and she lost her life there. That account first came from the man accused of directly carrying out the attack during police questioning, though Samia's father continued denying any involvement to the very end. Alongside her father and first husband, police also detained her uncle, accused of arranging a falsified medical report before the autopsy was even finished, along with the police official who'd overseen the original investigation. At trial, Samia's first husband withdrew his earlier statement, claiming it had been made under pressure. He spent a little over 2 years in custody before being released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, he remarried and later tried again to relocate to the UK. That attempt failed. Samia's father remained in custody from July through December 2016, then was released on bail in January 2018. His long-standing health problems eventually caught up with him, and he passed away still denying any involvement in his daughter's death. Her uncle and the police official were also released that same fall, facing no legal consequences. Not long after, Pakistani authorities issued arrest warrants for Samia's mother and sister, but both women got back to Bradford before they could be taken into custody. Her mother later gave a lengthy interview, attempting to shift blame onto Samia and Saeed, framing them as the reason the once close family fell apart. In spring 2017, Samia's mother and sister went to court, trying to block the release of a documentary about her death. The court denied their request, and a year later, the film premiered, telling the world the story her family had tried so hard to bury. Samia Shahed came from a family with money, status, and every outward appearance of success. But underneath all of it was a young woman who spent her entire life seeking one thing she was never truly given: the freedom to choose her own path. In the end, that choice cost her everything. What do you think really happened behind those closed doors? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if stories like this matter to you, make sure you're subscribed, because we're covering another true crime documentary next week.